Hey, do you have to do a double materiality assessment? In this podcast episode, I'm going to talk to Anna, who's a sustainability manager at Telia. And she just went through the whole process of conducting a double materiality assessment, doing a gap analysis, and preparing everything for the CSRD. So if you're in this process, definitely check out this podcast episode because she is sharing all her learnings and insights. So this is going to be super helpful to you. Hey, Anna. And first of all, thank you so much for taking the time. For those of the listeners that don't know you yet, can you tell us a little bit about your background? What is your job position and what company are you working?
Of course. And first of all, thank you for having me. My name is Ana Paz. I work at Telia company, and my position is a sustainability reporting manager. So that's really looking at anything related to reporting for sustainability for the whole group, for the whole Telia company.
Okay. And maybe just two sentences about Telia company. Like what exactly, like the name already gives something away, but like what exactly is it that you do?
Yes, of course. So Telia is a telecommunications company. It's located in the Nordics and Baltics. So we basically, the core focus or the core services that we provide are mobile and fixed data services. So broadband, internet, telephone services. This is where we are.
Yeah. And about your sustainability team, can you tell me roughly like how many people are working on the topic of sustainability in your company?
Yeah. So I can perhaps bring it a bit into like sustainability in general and then like sustainability reporting because I think that's always
Hmm.
useful. So when it comes to sustainability, we have a group sustainability team, and that's about 6 people. But then we also have sustainability leads in each of the countries that we operate. So these are like core roles that have a sustainability title to it. Then, of course, then there's additional colleagues who don't have sustainability in the title, but then they're also like strongly collaborating with us. And this, hard to estimate, but it's probably like another 15 stakeholders where there's like lots of interconnections to sustainability. So that's like sustainability on a working level. And when it comes to sustainability reporting, then we have a full-time person, which is me.
Mhm.
And then also now, here I'm perhaps going a bit more into the detail, but we also now have a stronger collaboration with finance. So then that also means that we have part-time uh, people working on our sustainability reporting as of this year, which is something very exciting.
Okay. Yeah. Super nice. And what about the past sustainability reportings? Like how does the past of your company look like? Have you done sustainability reports before? Are you now working on the first? How is the situation?
Yes, that's a great question. And I'm happy to say this is not the first year
Mhm.
because otherwise it would be very, very challenging. Historically, Tenya has been, and here I might be telling wrong details, but I think all the way from like 2011 already has provided sustainability reports. And of course, every year, then those have been evolving and, like being reconstructed as trends develop. So from that perspective, it's, there's a history behind that, which is always good to build on. Then, of course, when it comes to the new requirements, then there's obviously new things and new aspects for us. So you could say that, yes, we're definitely not new, but of course, then that doesn't mean that we're exempt from all of these uh, new pieces or questions. It's not like we're then excelling and fully ready for it. I don't think anyone really is.
Yeah, no, definitely. I feel like we're all struggling with like the latest legislations and like adapting to that and like getting forward. But it's super nice to see that you already have like so much, or your company has so much experience in like working on sustainability. And I definitely believe that makes it easier to like work on the
Yeah.
current task. So speaking about the current task, can you give us a quick like update? What is the current state of the sustainability reporting? What are you working on right now? What is the puzzles that you're trying to solve right now?
Yes. So in short, that would be CSRD. But then, of course, we also know that that comes with a lot of sub layers of requirements. So if I briefly talk about last year, which was also like I guess we had the key deliverables in preparation for CSRD for this year. So last year we actually did our double materiality analysis, and we also conducted our gap analysis to understand, first of all, where do we need to prioritize or to really put efforts into like which topics to look at. But then also when looking at the directive, how do we compare to what we already do versus what's required? Where do we need to go an extra mile? Where are we already like sort of, well covered? So that has been sort of like last year. This year it's more about, uh, I mean, I guess like basic work has already been done. But then of course that's just like the start of the journey.
Mhm.
So this year it's really about how do we take these insights or findings from the gap assessment? How do we turn them into opportunities, act on them? How do we close gaps? How do we make sure that our reporting this year is in line with CSRD? So that's also like another challenge, like the reporting structure. How do you make sure that you're spot on with your answers? You don't really want to provide lots of like, I don't know, like irrelevant
Mhm.
information, but really, like focus it better. So this is where we're at the moment. So that's, I just have to say it's very interesting and it doesn't get boring.
Yeah, I definitely believe that. I would love to dive a little bit more deeper into like the DMA process that you did and the gap analysis. But maybe before we do that, because like a lot of companies are now maybe still in front of the DMA process and they're considering like, hey, how should they do it? Should they use the software? How should they approve it? So quite broadly, how did you do the double materiality assessment? Did you use the software or not? And why did you did it the way that you decided to?
Yes, so that's a great question. And we actually did not use the software. Um, we did it last year, and of course, it was very new to us, but of course, with like many other suppliers. So we did actually like join a few webinars and try to check a few offers here and there. And I think one of the main challenges that we had was trying to adapt to the way that we already had certain things at Telia that could be useful for our DMA. And I guess with the providers that we saw, it was really just like starting from scratch, like template type of thing, which is obviously very beneficial and useful. But we also wanted to make sure that we could make use of our Telia ways of working and frameworks that could build on it. So that was one of the key sort of like considerations as to why we didn't jump on a software. And the other was more of like we wanted to understand the exercise internally as to what is it that is this requires. And of course, we will need to revisit and continuously evolve it. But then we didn't want to jump into a software not really like knowing what that would mean and whether, like that would be our solution to it or not. So the first year was very manual. Now we have some learnings, of course, where now we can think, okay, if a software were to cover this specific point, then, we might think of it, which I think was, interesting or a good learning at least to then understand which pieces of it we're willing to or we need to evolve in the next round.
Yeah. And based on your experience of like doing the double materiality manually, how will you approach the CSRD? Will you also do it manually or are you looking to like include the software in that process?
Yeah, so for that part, we're actually then jumping into a software.
Mhm.
And here I think it's the fact that it's so much more like data gathering. Just like and it's also something that's on an annual basis. I think for our double materiality, we have internally determined that it's, like we revisit every year, but then we do like a really deep dive not every single year, because that's a lot of work,
Yeah.
but then every 2 to 3 years. So then that can be sort of flexible. But when looking at CSRD and the reporting that comes to it, then that's something that is needing to be done every single year. So it's best that we prepare ourselves with like a good start and a good software that can actually enable us to get a basis uh, to next year come back and look at our, like gaps and continuously learn and continuously evolve that. So I think from that perspective, that has been, like the shift in comparison to software use versus DMA as to the actual reporting.
Yeah, okay. No, it makes a lot of sense. I see that like because you already had some experience with sustainability and you already had some work done, that with the DMA, it makes sense to like do this manually and just like adapt to like what was done before. But with the CSRD, yeah, I totally agree that like doing all the data collection and all the processes and doing all of this manually and then like having to do this every year, like I do not want to be responsible for like the Excel sheet that
No,
is needed for
no.
that. So I can definitely see how a software makes sense. Okay, then I would really love to like dive into what we just mentioned before with your double materiality process and the gap analysis
Mhm.
process. Could you just tell us a little bit like what were the main steps that you did? Like, can you just guide us through it a little bit?
Yep, of course. So if I start off with the double materiality, I think it was like 5 steps or bigger steps. I think the first one was where we did spend a lot more time, and this was with like a core team of risk experts and sustainability experts. And it was really to define or like, first of all, to understand ourselves, what it is that we were targeting, what was the deliverable, what criteria were we going to assess, how are we going to approach it? So it was really just to set the ground as to what we're going to do. Also to understand what systems or frameworks or information we had internally that could be useful for us so that we didn't like reinvent the wheel or, like really started from scratch. So that there was a lot of like internal alignment as to how to approach this project before we actually then reached out to our stakeholders. That took a lot of time and a lot of internal discussions and how to go about this. The second step was actually to reach out to our matter experts, our internally, and this step was really just to like map or to draft statements for impacts, risks, and opportunities. So this was just like, what are possible risks, impacts, and opportunities in your area of work?
Mhm.
Then the next step was to assess these. So here it's like where we combine step 1 and step 3, where in step 1 we had identified like what are the thresholds, how are we going to like provide criteria for colleagues to assess this. Whereas in step 3, then it's like you have already mapped the IRO. Then now it's about assessing the IRO, but then we already had like a guide as to like if it's from level 1 to 4, etc. And then like clear definitions as to in which level they would land. Once we had that initial mapping or like assessment with the matter experts, then we went into step 4, which was really just like discussions, roundtable discussions with each of the matter experts to really make sure that we had like a robust answer to each IRO. And this was really to, I mean, in the end, there's always like discrepancies or like differences between the different impacts, risks, and opportunities and how they have been assessed. So it was really like, what information can we build on that really defines this risk is at this level versus it being lower or higher? So really just trying to push back a bit, but then also feedback, like possible ways to go, how to go about it. Um, so once we had then a good foundation for that, then the last step was really just like aggregating all of the information. And that's when we combine until like, so we had gone all the way to sub topic level as, like shown in the ESRS. And then now it was like zooming out again, really just clustering all of these impacts, risks, and opportunities into the topics that they belong to. And then scoping out like, okay, this topic is then material for us because it has either one material impact, risk, or opportunity. So it was just like, really like gathering. And then I would have to say that the challenge was also like, to what level should you aggregate? Sometimes when aggregating, you lose granularity, of course. And sometimes then it's not easy to understand. So it was a bit of a mix to try to embed things to make it understandable. That is sort of like the overarching steps that we took for our double materiality. Right or not, I mean, there's always ways that it can be perfected, but I think overall it was quite a useful exercise for colleagues to understand why is it that we're working on all of these topics.
Yeah, sounds very interesting. I really like the way that you approached it and you zoomed in and out of like the process. So once you did the double materiality assessment, like how was the how did you continue from there towards the gap analysis? Can you maybe describe this, like this transition as well?
Of course. So I think here we actually took the gap assessment like a before DMA and then after DMA. And the reason why we did this is because ever since we got the one of the like initial drafts in like November 2022, if I recall,
Mhm.
then we were already trying to understand like, okay, this is coming. What will it mean for us? And, like how ready are we? So when that came to us, we did an initial gap assessment, and this was just like very preliminary in like spring of 2023. Um, so really to like capture the totality and how would we look if we were to report against it at the moment. Then when the final draft came out, then there was also at the same moment we were doing our double materiality assessment. So when we had covered or done the double materiality assessment, then we did the second phase of our gap assessment in order to then be able to use the findings from the double materiality to like scratch out pieces that were not material for us. So then in that sense, it was like easier since colleagues had already been working with this gap assessment since before. So when looking at the DMA, they were like sort of connecting the dots as to like these are the topics that are listed. Now it's really about like combining it with the impacts, risks, and opportunities. And then once we have determined that these are material for us, how does this reflect in our gap assessment? So it was, I would say, in the end, it worked out well. Of course, at the beginning, it was a bit like, oh, what does this mean? And how does this work?
Mhm.
But eventually this back and forth between the DMA and the gap analysis worked out quite good, I would say.
Okay. Yeah, super, super interesting to hear. And what would you say in general, if you're looking back at the process that you did so far, what were the main learnings that you had?
Oof. I think, stakeholder engagement is quite crucial in all of these processes. So I think one of the learnings is just like taking time to really make sure that colleagues and people are understanding what you're asking. I know myself, I struggled a bit at the beginning just to like the terminology. What does it mean? How do you make it into like, I don't know, like normal, everyday type of wording so that
Mhm.
people are not like frustrated and pushed back, but rather, you make it friendly and you try to make it a bit more um, aligned to the work that they do every single day, because that's really the what happens. So really just trying to take the time to get people to understand so that then you can actually get like good outputs out of it.
Okay. Yeah. And earlier in our conversation, you mentioned that you did the double materiality manually, and this process already helped you to like gather some learnings and then to like later know, oh, what steps could be automated and whatnot. Are there like
Yes.
specific steps where you now would say like, oh, this could maybe be done by a software or this could maybe be like automated? So like maybe we can dive into the learnings from this step a little bit.
Yes, of course. So I think one part was just like the structure and how do you assess certain things. So we did a manual Excel, but I think it would have been nice to have a system where like you had like a clear sort of like guidance as to this is what an IRO could look like, and or an impact or a risk or an opportunity, because they're also framed differently. Then when it comes to the like categorization, there we used our enterprise risk management framework. So it would have been nice to have like the system where in one place you get the definitions for like if you're scoring the financial effect on the company and you have threshold for 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the same file, and then you as a user can like easily connect and assess that specific risk, for example. Our case was like we had our guidance in another document. Then we had
Mhm.
the Excel file where it's where like people would plot the like the answers. So that part, I mean, from a user or like user friendly perspective, perhaps it wasn't so friendly. So I think these type of things also make an impact. I mean, colleagues are very busy, so you also don't want to, like really take so much time, but at the same time, you do want them to take the time to really think about these things and, like provide the inputs. So it's a bit challenging, I do have to say.
Yeah. And from the time perspective, you now mentioned that like I think you said that in November 2021 was the first time where you looked at the first draft of the gap analysis. So how much time did the DMA process take in total? But then
Mhm.
also, how much time would you think, like, would it take you right now? So it's kind of two questions, like how much
Mhm.
time would
Yeah.
it take you? Because like there was still developments and stuff was changing. And yeah, how much time would it take you now?
Yeah. And I think also to mention that at the time when we were doing the double materiality assessment, there was not this FRAG guidance on the double materiality. So it's
Hmm.
also like, we can't really wait because we want to already take steps, but
Mhm.
that's how it is. I would say our DMA process took around like 5 to 6 months, from like really like scratch until like finish. And of course, I think as a first round, it usually takes a lot more time because it's the first time colleagues are hearing these terms. Sometimes also the first time they're looking at topics in this specific way. Sometimes it's just really embedded, right? We act on certain things, but we don't really think about like why do we do this? There's an impact to it. So these type of like, I guess, thinking differently. Usually when you approach it for the first time, it takes a bit more time. So I would say, perhaps if we do it, like doing it again this year would probably be easier and faster just because everyone's so much more aware of what this means. But there's also so much more guidance and examples out there where you can actually build on and be like, okay, we didn't include this. We can learn from this. Um, so I think it's now it for us, at least it's more like tweaking and, like improving it every single year. Um, so hopefully next time it won't be like a 6 month sort of like full-time process, but rather like I don't know, here I'm just saying out loud, maybe 2 months. And then it's like an easier case. Let's see.
Yeah, no, makes a lot of sense. And I completely get it that like the first time doing it, like it's all new, like we have to like get into the whole process. So it makes completely sense that the first time it just takes longer. And then with the next, hopefully we can just like improve the work that was already done and then get closer and closer to the ideal version
Exactly.
that we're
Exactly.
looking. Okay, I have one last question, and you kind of already answered it with like when I ask you about the challenges of the whole process, but maybe just to like looking back generally, like what would be like the main challenges you would say? You already mentioned that stakeholder engagement is not easy, but what just to like summarize maybe what would be challenges or the main challenges of the process in your opinion?
So I think clear communication, like what is the why, also the why
Mhm.
and how are we doing this? Also, engagement with top management so that there's alignment since the beginning and
Okay.
not just, like in the interim or end step so that they also understand the relevance of it. And just like on an operational basis, just um, simplifying things to an extent that it's more encouraging than scary, if I could summarize it that way.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. I agree. I definitely agree with that. Okay. Thank you so much for taking the time. I feel like I learned a lot about you doing the double materiality process and telling me about it. So thank you very much for this. And I hope that we can talk very soon again.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you've come this far, thank you so much for listening to the AtlasZero podcast. The goal of AtlasZero is to help companies to find the right sustainability solution. And we are really focused on all the EU compliance topics. We have a solution finder, we have an automated RFP process, and we also do a lot of consulting projects in this area. So if you're looking for a solution, make sure to reach out to us. And I have to ask this, please like and subscribe this podcast episode. It helps us a ton to reach more people. And at the end of the day, we really try to reach as many people as possible with our free content. So thank you very much. And I hope I see you very soon.